Welcome back to Making of a Moment, the RSL Story. I'm here, Amy Donaldson, host of the podcast. And I guess I would consider this our end of the season exit interview.
Okay.
I'm here with Trey Fitz'Gerald, Vice President of Communications for the team. And the reason that the two of us have been tortured on and off together for 3 years, and I think we'll probably continue to be tortured because, like the sports we love, and Trey and I are huge sports fans, this end of something is really not the end. It's the end of today, or it's the end of the season, or it's the end of this chapter, right? So the podcast is coming to an end this week. We will publish episode 6. There are a couple of really great bonuses I hope people will listen to. One of them is The World According to Pablo. Little coaching advice. For one thing, I think a lot of people who've been listening to the podcast have not ever had like a competitive sports experience. And I really wanted the podcast to transcend that aspect of sports because we're inundated with a lot. I mean, I guess as we come to a close, exit interview style, sort of, do you have some final thoughts, questions? Like, what's this experience been like for you?
I'm excited to hear Pablo's bonus episode because one of the things that I love most about our club, our culture, is that, you know, Pablo is our head coach. He played in World Cups, played 1 million games in MLS, has coached several hundred now, but he uses life philosophy to reach the competitive spirit, not just of the locker room, but everybody in and around the club. So much of, I think, the way he looks at the world applies to you or me or the listener or the average person, because we all have struggles. We all have good days and bad days. We all have wins and losses. But Pablo, I think, has a extremely rare and unique way of looking at that. And, you know, when you're in a bad run, the only way out is through. And he taught us that a long time ago when he, as you mentioned, kind of took a job he may not have wanted. Yeah.
I mean, the one thing he told Freddie when Freddie talked to him about coming to Salt Lake, Pablo was in Houston, and he talked to him about coming to Salt Lake and helping him rebuild the culture or create a culture that was very, that had been through some tough times. Well, that's the reason we did the podcast.
And, look, everybody has volatile times where you just think there is no light at the end of the tunnel and there's no hope. Pablo's very good about always reminding you that hope may just be right around the corner. So, but it's not just Pablo. It's been Jason Kreis. It's John Kimball, John Jenna. It's the people that, somehow got out of bed every day during the darkest days. And there's a Nadim Onuaha who is able to bring his worldly experience and his connections to help the furloughed employees financially in the short term. So just the whole Making of a Moment Season 1 podcast, I think it is so much more. Sports is maybe a metaphor, I think is how we have to look at it. It's not just about wins and losses. It just seems like the results on the field are very reductive. And I think what this experience, helping you connect with the different people, tug on different threads about what this club means in the community, what this community means to the greater worlds of CONCACAF and Major League Soccer and U.S. national team, men's and women's, and the NWSL and all these things that we're a part of. It's about human nature and human spirit and teamwork and generosity. There's a million things that come through. And
I think one of the things, because you know how much I struggled to name this podcast, right? Like what, and to name something, you really have to know what it's about in this work. And I think one of the things that became clear to me was this idea of the moment. And part of that became clear to me when right at the beginning of the 2022 season. So we end with 2021's playoff run. That was really the reason we made the podcast. But for me, it became what makes this playoff run even more interesting, hard, special, crazy, miraculous, whatever, than it looks on the surface, right? But once we got into 2022, I started to realize, oh, nothing's going to stay the same. Oh, no. You and I talked about this. You're like, no, you've got to do it by this date. Or, we started panicking. And then I remember saying to you, like, oh, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. And I didn't know why until I heard Pablo say something about a moment, these moments. And I'm like, that's the thing. You might not be, Robbie Russell was not the greatest soccer player to ever play at any level. But he took a moment and made this memory, this emotional connection for thousands of people that he will never meet, right? So he, in his moment, he shined, right? And so that's one of the things I thought of was like, maybe you're not the person who's going to save the world forever. You're not Superman, but you're the Superman of that moment. Maybe Pablo isn't going to stay at RSL forever was my thinking, right? But maybe he was the guy for that moment. Yeah. And that's really the way I started thinking about it. I really hope he does stay a lot longer because there's so much to learn from him. I do want to hit back on one thing. So much of what Pablo and our conversation, it was so easy for me to digress, which we all know. If you've known me 5 minutes, I will go down any unpaved trail with you. And that is this idea, like when he told me that one of the things he did after he lost his job in Colorado was read the book Untethered Soul. I was like, I have to read that book. So I read that book. And I was just like, how? I still have many questions about it, but I thought I'll wait till the pod's done so I can do this. Yeah. But when I'm in talking to his players and asking them to describe him, like one word always comes up, right? And it's spiritual. And there's a lot of other normal coaching words, but spiritual always comes up. And he's not spiritual in the sense that we might think of like initially, right? It's just this sort of existential thought process about daily things. And when I was watching some of those interviews in the end of the season here that you sent me, I remember one of the reporters saying, I've taken a bunch of notes, but they're all about what kind of parent, how this is going to impact my parenting. It has literally nothing to do with his job as a reporter covering MLS, right? And that's kind of the weird, I call him a Renaissance man at one point, but I don't even know if that fits, right? But that's really the reason that these normal sports things sort of take on another realm, because at the end of the day, we're all judged by some measure. And in sports, it's wins and losses. It's the scoreboard, right? You have to win to be relevant, and nobody will tell you that faster than Pablo Mastroeni. But what he'll also say to you is, there's a lot of things on the way to that result that matter more. And that's what I think really I sort of, that was the deliciousness of this podcast for me. It was kind of soaking in that as I was working on it. Well,
and as sports fans, and look, you can replace the soccer with basketball or hockey or football, whatever,
or golf,
the locker room. At the end of every year, when there's only one team that's ultimately happy at the end
Successful.
Of every year, right? Because they win the trophy. The other 30 teams or whatever are disappointed because somewhere along the way they stumbled. But just because you don't win a trophy doesn't mean you're a failure. And that's the space that I think Pablo loves to explore. And every week he talks about, okay, how do we prepare for that moment that determines success or failure, or win or loss? But, a lot of it, what he talks about is, man versus himself, the individual versus the ego. Team sports especially, it is only through group success that you achieve individual glory. But how do you put yourself in a position to contribute to the team? Well, you have to check your ego at the door a little bit. You have to be selfless, but you have to be selfish enough to rise to the moment.
Yeah.
So it's all these kind of contradictions, and spiritual is a great way to describe Pablo. He gets described as maybe a little new agey. He doesn't talk tactics publicly, like he keeps that in the sacred inner sanctum of the locker room. So people, I think, misunderstand that he's a vibes guy and these things that they sometimes use pejoratively, but that's what he wants to talk to the locker room through the media or through public forums about, is without committing to the larger purpose of the group. none of us are going to get anywhere, and it's going to be a roller coaster ride no matter what. So I just find his approach, his view, fascinating.
Yeah.
The Untethered Soul and many of the other books that he recommends, they're all about human connection, overcoming obstacles, and a lot of those obstacles we put in our own way. And it's just been fascinating to me to hear him kind of take these, I guess, sports bromides and apply them to individual lives off the field, and then take all these things that we go through as individuals, apply it to the group. And then when you get buy-in, and I've said this since the day, in 21 when we started down this road, like, I have never been around locker rooms as tight-knit as these ones under Pablo in my 25 plus years in MLS, NBA, whatever. And it's always fascinating to me. But what I was starting to say too is that when we don't win a trophy at the end of the season, change is inevitable. That group is never going to be together again. And whether it's Robbie Russell rising to the moment in 2009 to win that cup.
But Justin Merriman and Damir Kreilach, both are gone.
Yep. Yeah. Or it's, in 2024, Justin Glad missing a penalty kick that could have extended, a playoff series. We know Justin's going to be back, but that locker room is going to be different when we start again in. Or
do we know that Justin's going to be back? We don't really know. That's the thing, we really don't know. But I think I talked to Justin about that, and that was one of the fascinating things about talking to Zach McMath, who had an amazing performance in that first playoff game against Minnesota. I mean, I was like, I've never seen him. I mean, he was like the second coming of Nick Raimondo in that game. He was crazy. It was crazy. I was like, what's going on here? Because he's such a low key, chill guy to the media people, right? Like he's just so. To me, if I describe him as an ice cream flavor, he is vanilla. If David Ochoa was Rocky Road, Zach is vanilla. So in talking to him about sort of really what was going on there, was fascinating. But then Justin Glad, who I have watched in the time I have. That was 2021 was his first real breakout playoff performance. He had either not been used or not done well.
Correct.
And so he has this amazing moment in Seattle, and it really lit a fire under him, and he's gained a ton of confidence. But the other thing I've seen is him changing maturity-wise. I listened to my interviews that I did with him in 2021, and I listened to the interviews I've done recently, or even the interviews he's done just in general, and I just see a young man whose world has expanded beyond soccer. He was so soccer focused. His whole life was driven to soccer. And I asked him about, forgetting about how do you quickly forget, or as Ted Lasso says, how do you become a goldfish and forget really quickly? And he said, he calls back to Kyle Beckerman and he said, did the sun come up today? Okay, then get to work. And I mean, and some people will say, well, like, that's not healthy. You have to, and I was like, but it also is healthy. It's not that he didn't feel disappointment, like he's not going to go through the tape and figure out what he did or didn't do right or wrong. That's going to happen. He's a professional athlete. But what he also needs to do is realize, like, this is as DJ says, David James in the final episode, if you've raised kids, buried parents, lived a life, this is not life or death. And so that's the thing to remember. And then the way, the natural, I guess, progression of that is, what does this mean in our lives? Like, what does sports mean to you? What do these games mean to you? And so I see that in the people I've been writing about in this podcast, but from your perspective, and you're also in the podcast, you have the advantage of being on both sides for me, but like, what do these games mean in the bigger scheme of things? They're not life and death, but they certainly have an impact.
No, I think the culture that we've had from Dave Checketts at the very, very beginning, now to Pablo, we've heard from Jason Kreis, we've heard from Kyle Beckerman, we've heard from so many people behind the scenes, and I guess I would boil it down to teamwork and making 1 + 1 = 3. That is kind of the goal of everybody on and off the field, is how do we together pursue a common goal, compete with others that are trying to achieve the same goal, but it's finding a way, and curveballs get thrown, and that can be injuries, that can be referee decisions, that can be ownership,
that can be trades, that can be
it can be so many things, big or small, in the grand scheme of things.
It can be things that are happening off the field. That's things that I think we don't really that Kyle Beckerman really brought. Like these, nobody wants to win more than the guys on the field.
Yeah,
don't ever think we don't care. But things are happening. Their kids are sick. They're going through a divorce. Their parents are dying. There's all kinds of stuff happening that we are not aware of.
Absolutely. And it affects everybody differently. And, but at some point, these are long seasons. These are long lifetimes. And as I think, Jason said to you, Real Salt Lake's going to be around forever and ever, and knock on wood. And hopefully, the types of things that get this group, I mean, we're 20 years in, but I think we're still just scratching the surface in many ways. So 20 years is a generation. You think of what this club has been through in this community. It's been a roller coaster ride, but a lot of these themes of belief, togetherness, determination, hard work. We're dispelling Utah stereotypes everywhere we go. That's not going to change anytime soon. When we travel internationally, we're dispelling American soccer stereotypes. We are, I don't know, there's just every day is a challenge and an adventure. And when everybody kind of checks their ego at the door and says, hey, I'm going to do whatever I can to help the people to my side to achieve this goal, great things happen. And it happens off the field, as you mentioned, and as the podcast explores just as often as it does on. Yeah.
One of the things I loved doing was talking to fans about, it's expensive to be a fan, right? You and I are fans of teams.
Sure.
We've spent a lot of money. I don't even know how much money my husband has spent on Ohio State gear. It's like not a thing I want to know. But so I wanted to understand, like, this is their leisure money. This is their date night. This is their they might make sacrifices to be season ticket holders or even to show up at different games, right? And so one of the things I wanted to explore was, like, what does this mean to you? And I think a lot of people had trouble. I don't know that they had considered that in any depth, right, at first. But there were some people who could tell you, and I think I talked with Pablo, and this will be in the bonus episode, about this idea that I'm never going to be Chicho. I'm never going to be even Justin Glad, or I'm never going to have an athletic performance like Zach McMath had against Minnesota. Not going to happen. But I can learn from that and take something from that, and I go out into my life and I run into something that feels as bad, like getting hit in the stomach with a rocket from a professional soccer player, and I can get back up and turn to somebody and ask for help or shine in a situation that I didn't want to do. I didn't want to deal with, right? Yeah. And that's where sometimes I think we lose that connection between teams and fans, especially as media members. Like, we're not exploring it at all. I don't know. Give me your thoughts on that because you're a fan. And
I'm a fan. As our world has become more divided, more fragmented, and how we consume information, the marketing messages that we're all bombarded with, I think it's, reliability of information is an issue, all these kinds of things. What sports teams provide is community. And when Dave Checketts founded this club in October of 2004, our colors are red and blue for a reason. He felt like Real Salt Lake could be a great unifier between the fans of the University of Utah, the Red Utes, Running Utes, whatever, and then BYU and football, basketball, the true blue fans there. And so, and I think every team would say that, like, in our arena or our stadium when we're playing. And I think this is very unique into Utah. Like, this is Utah at its most diverse, is that stadium in Sandy when it's full of 21,000 people, all finding community in each other, belief in the team on the field. Of course, there's an entertainment aspect, and you take that online and offline before and after the game. But it really is, I think it's what MLS Commissioner Don Garber early in his tenure in the late 90s when the league was very young and the sport was struggling. He believed that soccer could be a great unifier, and that's what Dave thought for this club in this community at the time. Again, now we're 20 years later, but there's so much to be proud of, and you're going to have your good years and your bad years. That's just inevitable for every team. The New England Patriots had a pretty good 25-year run. The Denver Broncos, who are my lifelong affinity from when I was 5 years old, have been a very well-run organization, thankfully, for the most of my life. But
they almost beat the Chiefs.
You just can't. If you're going to live and die with wins and losses every day or every week, that's a rough way to go. So you have to find something deeper, and you have to find something bigger, and I think that's what most fans find is that community space.
All right, we're going to wrap this up, but I want to end with one last thing, and I think this is a thing that gets dismissed a lot. So we look for all this deeper meaning. That's what I love to do. I torture everyone with my philosophical talks, but I also want to. I think we dismiss this idea of joy, this idea of a break, this idea of entertainment. Like life is meant to be enjoyable. It's not we need to find a purpose, and we need to. There's a lot of joy that comes from working hard, a lot of satisfaction, right? And in measuring our lives from that stick. But I think the thing, especially as we age, that we forget to do is have fun.
Yeah.
Is that entertainment and joy and laughter and just letting loose, that matters. And
it absolutely does. And I mean, finding an escape from maybe the really heavy issues, and look, those things bleed into sports. Sports and politics and life and trials and tribulations, they're all thrown into this pot together. They're not separable as much as we want to make it so. It's just impossible nowadays. So, but you're right about, finding maybe joy in the small moments that help you get through the difficult stuff, the dark stuff. And to your point about, I've heard Beckerman say it, I've heard now Justin Glad say it, like, if the sun rises, I mean, this is what Pablo said the morning after we were eliminated from the playoffs is, hey, the sun came up. I'm already ready for next year. Of course, there's an adrenaline dump, and there's kind of a, maybe a mini depression that you kind of have to go through. Yeah. When you're processing. But I think everybody, and this happens every year, and again, it happens more under Pablo than it did under previous cultures and coaches, but it's, okay, look ahead. How do I get better? How do I contribute more? How do I learn from you to make me a better performer when those moments come back? And that... It's a very optimistic way of looking at things, and
it's real because the sun is coming
up. But it is fuel for improvement, for work, and ultimately to attain those goals that we all set for ourselves individually and collectively.
And, it is the fan mantra. Hope springs eternal. You can trade our favorite players.
Believe. You
can not spend money on us. You can do whatever you want. We are RSL till we die.
That's right.
And so thank you for doing this. Thanks for going on this journey with me.
So much fun.
And you can find Making of a Moment, the RSL Story, anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. makingofamomentpod.com is our website. Stories, pictures, videos. And you can also find it now on the Real Salt Lake website. And we have some fun things planning. We're not done. This is not the end. We'll have some fun things coming down the road. But thank you so much for your support, and thank you for listening.